Hey guys, welcome back. We'll continue with the book Automate the Boring Stuff, and today we're going to cover how to work with Goole Sheets. You can read the book for free by heading over to automatetheboringstuff.com, or alternatively you'll find a link to the physical copy in the description down below. We covered in the previous video how to work with Excel sheets, and we can accomplish many of the same things working with Goole Sheets, and of course we are independent from Excel. In order to do that, we are going to use a third-party module called EZSheets, and this is going to help us authenticate and make requests for our Goole Sheets. To get started, we need to install EZSheets, and to do that we can head over to our Mu code editor, and from here we can click on the gear icon on the bottom right side, and then we can select third-party packages, and we can add EZSheets as an entry here and then just press on OK, and this is going to install that module for us. Now before we can actually use EZSheets to work with our sheets, we need to make sure that we have the API enabled for both Goole Sheets and Google Drive, and we also need to generate a credentials file to properly authenticate. You can find the links to enable the API in the book itself. So here we are heading over to console.developers.google.com, and we're going to have a look at the Sheets page and the Drive page. And if you haven't done that already, there will be a button to enable the API. And once you've done that, you'll get the notification API enabled, both for the Google Sheets API and then also for the Google Drive API. After that, we need to create our credentials file, which is going to generate two additional files, which are tokens for both Google Sheet and Google Drive. And to do that, we can head over to console.cloud.google.com to get to the Google Cloud platform, and from here we can click on the hamburger icon on the top left side, then scroll down to API and Services, and from here we can click on Credentials. Now on this Credentials page we need to create new credentials in order to properly authenticate, and to do that we can click on Create Credentials at the very top, and we want to generate a new OAuth client ID, so that's a way to authenticate. Now when we click on that, we can first select the application type. So we are working with the web application. We can provide a name, and then we can click on Create at the bottom. I already did this, so if I head back to Credentials, we can see there's an entry here under OAuth 2.0 client IDs, which is Web Client 1. It's a web application, and we can just click on the Edit screen here. And then it's important that we add a URI here under Authorized Redirect URIs, and we are going to add HTTP and then localhost 8080, which is the default address we are going to use when we are working with our Google Sheets API. And after we created our credentials file here using OAuth 2.0, we then need to make sure that we download the JSON file. So I'm going to click on that, and that's going to download this JSON document here, which we can rename. So what we need to do is we head over to the location where we are storing our Mu code files, which should be under the users directory and then under our name, and there you should find a directory called mu_code, and we are going to basically drag and drop the JSON file in here in this directory, and then we are going to rename it to credentials-sheets.json. And later on, when we authenticate, this is going to create two additional files, two additional token files. You also need to generate an OAuth consent screen. That may also pop up the first time you go to this page. And here we need to provide a name. I just called it name, for instance. It will be in the testing status, which is fine for now. We want to set the user type to external. And it's important that we add a test user. So down here we would provide the email address that's associated with our Google Drive or Google Sheets account. Now with all this in place, let's head back over to our code editor. And now we can go ahead and import our module and then actually make a test. So for that, I'm going to open the REPL. And when we type in import EZSheets to import our module, a new tab is automatically opened, and that asks us to authenticate in our Google Drive. So here I'm just going to confirm this. In this case here, I haven't verified this app. We could do that, but for now that's fine. I'm just going to click continue. And then we can see the name of our application here that we specified in the consent screen. We can click on continue, and then we're getting the notification here that the authentication flow has completed, and we may close this window. Now once the authentication is completed, we can go ahead and we can create a new Google Sheets file. So in this case, we can just call it, for example, education data. And here we have the title, type, and a URL. And we have our book, Automate the Boring Stuff, which is a book with a URL. And for example, 3 additional entries in here. And let's have a look if we can use EZSheets to actually get that data and display it in the new code editor. And to do that, we need to get the ID of this particular Google Sheet. We can get that directly from the URL. So if we have a look here at the top, we should find a URL that's in here. It is in this case here after d/, then this long series of digits and characters, and it ends with / and then edit. So anything in between those slashes we want to copy. And then we can go ahead. If we haven't done so, we would import EZSheets, and then we are going to specify a variable for our spreadsheet, and we're going to set that equal to EZSheets.spreadsheet, and in quotation marks here we are going to paste that identifier, and then we can go ahead and, for example, type in the name of our variable, and that's going to give us back a spreadsheet object here with that specific ID. And we can also reference attributes of our spreadsheet object. So for example, the title, which is education data, and that of course matches the title that we have provided here. We can also go ahead and create a new Google Sheet using our module. For that, again, we need to make sure that we import our EZSheets module, and then we can go ahead and we can specify a new variable for our spreadsheet. Again, we are using our EZSheets module, but this time we are going to call create spreadsheet on it, and then we are providing the name of the spreadsheet, so it's pretty straightforward. And after that, of course, we can, for example, have a look at the title, and indeed it's called title of my new spreadsheet. And if we head over to Google Sheets, we can indeed see that there's a new sheet generated, which has exactly that name. And of course, currently it's empty, so if we take a look at that, we can see the title is provided, everything else is empty, but we basically used our module to create a new Google spreadsheet. We can also upload an existing file, for example, an Excel file, OpenOffice file, or CSV file to Google Sheets. And to do that, we can of course first create our Excel file. Here, for example, we generated a file that we called my_spreadsheet, which is saved in the mu code file in the same directory where also our other code files are saved. And then we just have some content in here. And to upload our file, we of course first need to import our EZSheets module. And then we can go ahead and we can call upload on EZSheets and just provide the name of our spreadsheet. So in this case, my_spreadsheet. And after that, we can call title on our spreadsheet, and we can see the title name is correctly displayed. Now we can also list the spreadsheets in our Google account by calling list spreadsheets on EZSheets, and that's going to return the spreadsheets we recently uploaded. So if we call a list spreadsheets on EZSheets, we can see my spreadsheet, the Excel file we just uploaded is displayed, but then also title of my new spreadsheet and also our education data. And we can not only see the title name, but also the specific ID, which we could use to access that spreadsheet. Now we can also go ahead and we can manipulate the attributes in the spreadsheet. And while the actual data always is inside of the spreadsheet's individual sheets, the spreadsheet object we are working with has a number of different attributes which we can use to manipulate the spreadsheet. And to do that, let's first import our module again, and then we are going to reference a specific spreadsheet. So in our case, we're going to use the education spreadsheet that we saw before. And just as a quick reminder, this is what the spreadsheet looks like. So we have 3 different columns: title, type, and URL. And then we have a number of different entries here with different programming resources. So as before, we can go ahead and we can reference the title, which of course is going to give us back education data. So precisely the title of our spreadsheet here. But we can also go ahead and change the title. So if we call title on our spreadsheet object and we set it to a different value, for example, class data, we are going to update our spreadsheet. And if we now switch over, we can see it has automatically been updated here from education data to class data. We can also retrieve the ID of the spreadsheet by calling spreadsheet ID on our spreadsheet object. And that's going to return again the ID we've been working with. And in a similar way, we can get back the URL under which we can access that spreadsheet, and that of course is including the ID of our spreadsheet. Now if we head over to our spreadsheet, we can, for example, add additional tabs and give them specific names, for example, students, classes, and resources. And to reference those, we would head back to our new code editor, and now we can call sheet titles on our spreadsheet object. And now we can go ahead and call sheet titles on our spreadsheet object, and that's gonna give us back exactly those 3 different tabs that we created. If you want to see more information about specific sheets, we can also call sheets on our spreadsheet object, and that's gonna give us back the different individual tabs, for example, students, classes, and resources, the row count, column count, for all of the different tabs that we have created. And then we can go ahead and we can reference individual sheet objects by indexing those. For instance, if we type in the name of our spreadsheet object and then in brackets 0, we're gonna get back the first spreadsheet tab, students. And of course we can also, for example, get back the second one by just indexing it with the number 1. As an alternative, we can type in the name of the specific tab, for example, students, and that is basically gonna give us back the very same information as by using an index. We can also use our Python functions from before to delete spreadsheets. So for instance, if we use the del function here and we pass it the spreadsheet object with index 1, we can then see if we head over to our Google Sheet here that we only have 2 tabs remaining, students and resources, and the tab in between has been deleted. And we can also confirm that in code. For example, if we call sheet titles on our spreadsheet object, we can see that we only get back students and resources, but the classes tab has been deleted. We can even go ahead and download the data, for example, as an Excel file or as a CSV file, by calling, for instance, download as Excel, this function on our spreadsheet object. And that's going to return to us the name under which the download has occurred. And if we have a look at our new code folder where we're storing all our code, here we can see the file class data has indeed been downloaded. And if we have a look at that in Excel, we can see we have the same data here that we had in our Google Sheet with the separate tabs, but now downloaded as an Excel file. And we could do the same to download our Google Sheets data in other formats, for example as a PDF document or as a CSV document. As an example here, we could download it as a PDF file. And again, we are generating a PDF file with the name of the title, which is stored in our new code folder. And if we open up that PDF file, we can see we have indeed the same data as before, but this time exported as a PDF document. We can also go ahead and delete spreadsheets. For that, we are just importing our EZSheets module again, and for demonstration purposes, we're going to create a new spreadsheet called delete me. We can of course confirm that the spreadsheet has been created by calling list spreadsheets on EZSheets. And here we can see at the very top we have our delete me file with the ID. And then we can get ahead and simply call delete on our spreadsheet object, and that should delete our file. Now for safety purposes, the delete method is going to move our spreadsheet to the trash folder in Google Drive. To permanently delete a file, we would have to pass that as an argument to our delete method. So here we're passing permanent and we're setting it equal to true. And this way we are permanently deleting the file, it's no longer available. Now a spreadsheet will have one or more sheet objects, and the sheet objects represent the rows and columns of data in each sheet. And to access those sheet objects, we can first of all reference our sheet objects using our call that we covered before. And then we can have a look at the sheets themselves by calling sheets on our spreadsheet object. We can see the different individual sheets. And then we can go ahead and index those sheets. For example, we can have a look at the first sheet by calling sheets with an index of 0. Or as a shorthand, we can just index 0 on the spreadsheet object itself, and that's gonna give us back the same values. Now, just as with Excel, Google Sheet worksheets also have columns and rows of cells containing data. And of course, we can create new spreadsheets in code, but also add data to it. For example, different cell data, row and column data. So to do that, we can create a new spreadsheet and call it, for example, my spreadsheet. And then, for example, we can reference the first tab here and assign that to a separate sheet variable. And let's first have a look at the title of that sheet we just referenced. So that is the default name sheet 1, which is automatically generated when we create a new spreadsheet. Next we can go ahead and change the data in the different columns. For example, here we have the cell A1 and we are going to set that to name in our sheet which we referenced before. In a similar way we can set the cell B1 to be equal to age, and we can set C1 to be equal to favorite movie. Now if we reference sheet A1 again, of course we get back name. And in a similar way we can go ahead and set the value for sheet A2 to be equal to Alice, sheet B2 to be equal to 30, and sheet C2 to be equal to Robocop. Now if you have a look at our Google Sheet, we can see that these column values have been updated accordingly. So we have our heading here, A1, B1, C1, and then we have our row below that with the values of Alice, 30 and Robocop. Now this way we can write data one cell at a time, but that of course can take a long time. And to facilitate that, EZSheets also provides methods that are more helpful for us, so that we can, for example, write entire and columns and rows at the same time. And to work with an example that contains more data, we can use one of the spreadsheets we worked on before, which is our produce spreadsheet that we worked on in the previous video. And just to recap, this is what the spreadsheet looked like. So we have the produce here, the cost per pound, the pounds sold, and the total amount. And this is quite a long list of entries here. So we have a lot of values. So if you wanted to set that one cell at a time, that would take a long time for sure. So to work with that and to convert it to a Google spreadsheet, we need to import our module, of course, again. And then we are going to call our upload method on our EZSheets module, and we pass in the name of the Excel file. It's important, of course, that the Excel file is located in the same folder as the other files we're working with, so in our mu code directory. Next, we can get the first tab in our file, which is also the only sheet file we have in our spreadsheet that we are working with. After that, we can go ahead and get the entire row information. For that, we call getRow on our Sheets object here. And it's important to note that other than in Python, the Google Sheets API works in that way that it's not 0-based, but 1-based. That means when we pass a value of 1 to it, that will indeed get us the value for the first row, not for the second row, because again, the numbering starts at 1, not at 0, because the Google API differs from the Python API. And when we press enter, we can see we get the row information from our first row, which of course is here the row with the headings. In a similar way, we can get the data for the second row. So this is really the first row with entries. So here we have potatoes, and then we have the cost per pound, the pound sold, and also the total amount. We can also go ahead and get column data. So here we are calling getColumn with a value of 1, which is going to give us back the first column. And we're going to store that back in a variable called column1. Now let's have a look at the value of the first column, and we can see this is a lot of values here that are displayed. And that makes sense, of course, since our spreadsheet is very long here, so we have a lot of values included. Rather than passing a value of 1 to get column, we can also pass a column name to it, so A by default, and that's going to give us back the same values. Now, rather than just reading and updating as well as uploading sheets, we can also copy Google Sheets. And for an example, let's first import our EZSheets module, and then we're going to create two separate spreadsheets. The first one is called first spreadsheet, and the second one, unsurprisingly, is going to be called second spreadsheet. And again, we can reference the zeros index of our first spreadsheet, and we get back the specific tab. So here the default title is sheet 1, and then we can go ahead and we can call update row on this first sheet, and we are going to pass some data into this row. Now, in order to copy over the data, all we need to do is call copy2 on our first spreadsheet, particularly the first sheet of the first spreadsheet, and then as an argument we pass spreadsheet2 to copy2. And if we now call sheet titles on our second spreadsheet, we can see that it now contains a copy of spreadsheet 1. And of course we can also have a look at that in Google Sheets itself. So here we have the first spreadsheet, and we used our update row method to update the data in this row here. And then we have our second spreadsheet, and here we have the default sheet, which is empty, and then we have the copy of sheet 1, and this contains the same data as we had in spreadsheet 1, but now copied over to another spreadsheet. Now, one thing to note here is that when we work with Google Sheets online, there's actually a restriction imposed by Google to how many requests we can do per day. So users are restricted to creating 250 new spreadsheets a day, and then by default we can perform 100 read and 100 write requests per 100 seconds. That should be fine, but if there's an issue, we can head over to our Google console and we could pay to increase the number of requests we are working with. Now let's have a look at our practice questions. The first one is, what 3 files do we need for EZSheets to access Google Sheets? So to access Google Sheets, we need a credentials file that we generated using the Google console. And this is going to create a token file for Google Sheets and a token file for Google Drive. What 2 types of objects does EZSheets have? So EZSheets has the EZSheets.spreadsheet and EZSheets.sheet objects that we are working with. How can we create an Excel file from a Google Sheet spreadsheet? So for this we would call the download as Excel spreadsheet method, and of course there are similar methods for downloading spreadsheets in other formats, for example as PDF documents or as CSV documents. How can you create a Google Sheets spreadsheet from an Excel file? So for that we would call the upload method on our EZSheets module, and we would pass the file name to the Excel file. And of course we need to make sure that the file is in the correct directory that we are working from. The SS variable contains a spreadsheet object. What code will read data from the cell B2 in a sheet titled students? For this we would need this code here. So we have a spreadsheet file that is stored in the SS variable, and we access students and then our cell B2. How can you find the column letters for column 999? So for this we would use our method getColumnLetterOf, and we pass the column to it, so 999 in this case, and this is going to give us back the column letter. How can you find out how many rows and columns a sheet has? So for this we would access the row count and column count properties of the sheet object. How to delete a spreadsheet, and is this deletion permanent? So we would use the delete sheet method, and this is only permanent if we pass the permanent keyboard argument and set that to true. What functions will create a new spreadsheet object and a new sheet object respectively? So the create spreadsheet function and the create sheet spreadsheet method will create spreadsheet and sheet objects respectively. What will happen if by making frequent read and write requests with EZSheets you exceed your Google accounts quota? So EZSheets in this case will throttle the method calls, and the only way around that is basically to pay to have a higher number of requests that we can issue. We learned how to work with Google Sheets, how to use the EZSheets module to access data from our Google Sheets, how to upload Excel sheets to Google Sheets, and how to create, delete and update the sheets. In the next video we are going to cover how to work with PDF and Word documents. If you haven't already, feel free to subscribe to the channel, and see you guys in the next video.